let's go ahead and get right into the action because I'm super excited to see how this one's going to turn out. And I bet you it's going to be a pretty great way to start off day number 2. When we take a look at the leads for both of these players, Renzo is going to be leading with that Umbreon and that Regieleki, and Kouhei kicking it off with that Regieleki and that Porygon 2, Adam.
The Regieleki has been something that I know some of our other casters really, really like when we talk to them about the formats and stuff that's coming up. And to see these Regielekis being used so liberally in this format, really, really good. I like that Kouhei's been bringing it, just threatening something like that Charizard nice and early on. Renzo not showing that to him and just being able to kind of play around it. But the Porygon 2's on the field, and I think we both know what is a very viable option for Kouhei in the coming turns.
Well, Renzo's going to go ahead and start things off with an Electro Web to drop the speed of both that Porygon 2 and the Regieleki on Kouhei's side. But take a look at this, Kouhei matching that, so no speed advantage in particular for either one of these trainers because they're just kind of evening the playing field here.
They have to, and that's something, a bit of a mind game that comes into it with the Regieleki combinations. You know, you have to be thoughtful about it and make sure that you don't let your opponent just get a speed advantage, but then you also often want to try and get in some damage. Nice play there, though, from the Porygon 2, not taking that taunt bait at all, and just firing back so nicely with that Ice Beam to pick up a knockout on the opposing Regieleki.
Yeah, I really love that play from Kouhei because, you know, Umbreon is one of those Pokemon that does like to run support for the rest of the team. And, hey, Renzo might have been looking to see if a Trick Room could have been coming his way, but Kouhei not reading into that at all, going for the Ice Beam instead. But Renzo now does get that free switch into the Groudon here. That could pose difficult for Kouhei with that Regieleki on the field.
That Regieleki on the field on Kouhei's side, super threatened now. I mean, it had a good opening turn, it landed the Electro Web, but the Groudon is something you just don't want to see. Ground types and Regieleki just don't get on, to be quite honest, and that probably forces a switch. The Umbreon there, though, just taking a bit of damage. I've been a little bit worried about the Umbreon and how well it's been doing in this tournament. Not seen it do too much yet, and I'd like to see a little bit more from it, so maybe this is the game for it to put in work. The taunt does shut down the Trick Room, but we've seen Kouhei just avoid this Trick Room option on so many occasions and just play this Porygon 2 absolutely going for it with attacks, and yep, that's going to be the 5th instance of the Dynamax Porygon 2.
Yeah, let's go ahead and see that Porygon 2 Dynamax back in action. And something else that I really love about the switch there from Kouhei is that, okay, yes, you know, Incineroar's not going to really take those ground type attacks from Groudon super well either, but Incineroar does get that Intimidate down. Groudon is still going to be able to fire back with an attack here as Umbreon also goes for a Snarl. It's going to drop the special attack of that Porygon 2, making it just a little bit less threatening. But Kouhei has still been able to get in tons and tons of damage with it, and that is a big Max Hailstorm going right into that Groudon.
It's a Max Hailstorm that also changes the weather, and the weather could be important for Renzo's last Pokemon. You know, we've seen the Regieleki go down, he's got the Umbreon Groudon on the field. That leads me to believe that the likelihood of a Venusaur or a Charizard in the back has got to be the Gigantamax option. That's what he's going to want to play around to see out the game, and if Kouhei can keep control of the weather here, you know, either force the Groudon out maybe so it has to reset with the Drought ability a little bit later. If that switch can be punished, that could be really detrimental to Renzo's strategy. That said, the Snarl, really, really important there, making sure that Porygon 2 has to go for 2-hit knockouts. You know, it's rare that you're shooting for a 1-hit knockout, but you really need to go for those 2 hits, especially after the Snarl. The Umbreon set on the field, this is what it needs to be doing more of. It needs to be dropping those Snarls, dropping those special attack stats on the other side, and this switch is, I think, really important for Renzo. If he gets it safely, this game could really quickly swing in his favor.
But you could also see that Kouhei was looking for a switch out as well, and that is to be able to bring in this Zacian. And I feel like that just means that Kouhei is posturing for this potential Gigantamax coming out from Renzo in the next following turns. Another Snarl does come out from Renzo's Umbreon to drop that special attack once again. And, you know, that's not going to affect the Zacian too much there because it is a physical attacker. But here comes another Max Hailstorm and a good switch in from Renzo to be able to take that and make sure that his Groudon will survive.
Probably feeling quite relieved that he doesn't have the Venusaur in the back right now. Probably feeling a little bit better that Charizard was able to come in. It is going to be the focal point of the team to round out the game. Came in pretty safely. I mean, yeah, you took some damage from the Max Hailstorm, but not as much as some of the other options that were available there. So good switch in for Renzo. Of course, doesn't have control of the weather right now. Doesn't have that sun set up to give the solar power boost and obviously boost those fire type attacks as well. So an incoming switch probably needs to happen to really activate and unleash the Charizard. Of course, that's on Kouhei to then try and call that and find out when that's coming in. It doesn't look like it's going to be this turn though, and I think if Renzo can get a turn down maybe without that, you know, the Umbreon may take an attack that looked like it was going to be for the Groudon. This game could very quickly swing, because I don't see, until that Regieleki comes back in, an easy way to handle this Charizard.
Yeah, the Zacian would have been good just to be able to get that, you know, double powered Behemoth Blade, but that's still not going to be a whole lot of damage to that Charizard. But a really nice read from Kouhei for the Max Guard on the Gigantamax Charizard. Will be able to take out that Umbreon with a very quick Sacred Sword. And that means that Porygon 2 doesn't have an attack target this time around, but that really does put Kouhei in a nice position with a second knockout on the board.
It gets him in a great position with that knockout, but I think the momentum can go very quickly Renzo's way here. The Groudon gets to come in for free, not taking any Max Hailstorms. Of course, the Max Hailstorm isn't even an option now. Porygon 2 is about to go back to its regular, the size we're more, you know, we're used to seeing him on. You know, the Ice Beams are still going to hurt, but he's not going to be able to change the weather now. So that Max Guard actually buys Renzo a turn, which I really, really like. Of course, there is still the threat of the Regieleki for Kouhei, but, you know, if the Charizard can play around the Regieleki, let the Groudon weave in some of those attacks, this game could get quite nasty quite quickly.
That's for sure. I mean, Kouhei here is forced into a position where he has to switch in that Incineroar. Will be able to drop the attack stat of that Groudon. So that is going to be super helpful just to be able to deal with some of the incoming damage, maybe from a Precipice Blades or something like that. And we're just going to see a Protect here from Renzo's Groudon, recognizing that Kouhei really has to go after that Groudon right now in order to remove it before that Regieleki comes in. However, we are going to see a Behemoth Blade, another good call from Kouhei, and take a look at how low that brings that Charizard, despite the fact that that's not very effective damage. In fact, it just knocks it out.
Yeah, the Charizard here, I think, you know, Renzo maybe needed to find an opportunity around the Groudon to weave in an attack. The Groudon played it safe, though, and Kouhei actually completely stopped any potential momentum swing from Renzo there by making the right call and having that Zacian on the board at the right time. So really nicely done there by Kouhei. You know, I thought Renzo had a foothold back into the game, but Kouhei just shut it down. Behemoth Blade, and the reason why I think Zacian's been so popular, you know, I mean, one of many reasons, but being able to shut down an option like that, just so nicely done. And yeah, Renzo just throwing in the towel, accepting that game's not going to go his way. I liked so much that he saved Groudon and Charizard to the end, but the board positioning from Kouhei was just a little bit too much.
Yeah, even though Kouhei was in this position where he had to kind of switch in and out a couple of times, I feel like there was one pivotal turn where Kouhei decided to switch in the Zacian when Renzo switched in his Charizard that I felt like really put Kouhei in a commanding position. Look how much that Behemoth Blade did, especially when you know that you're going to be doing double damage into a Gigantamax target. You take that chance and you take that option every single time you are given it. So I think Kouhei just really set himself up for success in that game number one.
There could have been a difference maker as well. I think, you know, if there was maybe the Charizard, yes, it had to Max Guard. I think that was the right call there, but at the same time, Kouhei, the last couple turns of the game, played it out so perfectly, punishing every Protect, always avoiding the Protect. That's just a sign of a top-tier player who can read into that and make sure that you keep the ball rolling with those knockouts. So really, really nicely done throughout that game. I liked the game plan from both players, but Kouhei just seemed a little bit further ahead, and I think the knockout nice and early on that Regieleki really did slow down Renzo a little bit. You know, we don't really talk about it because we didn't see much of it. We saw it drop an Electro Web and then get Electro Web and Ice Beamed off the field. But, you know, the pace was always kind of there from Kouhei on that one. The momentum swing was something he had to be careful of, and he shut it right down. So, fantastic game one, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they go about game number two.
Game 2 on the and is ready to go. And you know, I think the other thing that I'm really interested in seeing is, can Porygon 2 make another Dynamax appearance? And how well is it going to work out for Kouhei once again? Let's take a look at the leads here in this Game 2 of this best of 3. We've got Renzo with the Venusaur and the Groudon to kick things off this time. And Kouhei sticking to what he knows best, what worked in that game number 1, that Regieleki and that Porygon 2.
It worked so well for him. He was able to just pick up a knockout. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy in this opening turn. Maybe he's going to have to look for a Dynamax on the Porygon 2. But in general, it's a nice, solid lead. The Porygon 2 not feeling it, actually. Or the Porygon 2 staying on the field, sorry. The Regieleki not feeling it. An interesting play here. If Renzo goes after this Porygon 2, things can get quite nasty quite quickly.
Yeah, Incineroar just coming in here as a switch just to be able to drop that attack of that Groudon once again. And Kouhei going ahead and Dynamaxing really early again. That Porygon 2 just going to try to get out as much pressure as possible. And I feel like this is a good play. You know that when you're taking a look at the Groudon and the Venusaur on Renzo's field, I feel like you are able to just kind of, you know, bluff a little bit, right? Maybe I'm going to be going for another Max Hailstorm, but take a look at that. Kouhei just going to go ahead and Max Guard, and that's going to keep that Porygon mighty safe, but Renzo actually read that. Adam going for the Swords Dance here.
Well, no Gigantamax out of the Venusaur leads me to believe it may have just been going for a Sleep Powder over on that side. And if that Sleep Powder connects, you know, things get kind of nasty kind of quickly as that Porygon 2 becomes null and void. You don't get any Max Hailstorms. The Max Hailstorm has got to be the choice you're looking at pretty significantly here. You know, it's going to be able to hit both of them super effectively. It's going to take away the Sun, take away the Chlorophyll in turn as well. So, you know, being forced into playing defensive, certainly a little bit harder there. And I like this change-up. I think keeping access to the Sleep Powder, really nice from Renzo, and then just letting the Groudon post Swords Dance really go for it. That Groudon can't be faked out either.
No, you can see that Kouhei decided to fake out the Venusaur, so that will keep him safe from a Sleep Powder for this turn, but Groudon going for that Max Quake right into the Incineroar, and at that +1 from the Swords Dance, you know you're going to be knocking out that Incineroar.
And you're getting a special defense boost, so whatever this Porygon 2 does decide to throw down, you're able to take it a whole lot better. I think the special defense boost is so underrated from Max Quake. It is, of course, going to be the Max Hailstorm. Both of them are weak to those types of moves. And it's just going to be the Venusaur taking it. The Venusaur isn't going to be the focal point, though. I kind of like that the Venusaur's been thrown out there, saying, you know what, come look at this, be scared of the Sleep Powders, and just let the Groudon do its thing. The Venusaur not going down, though. Venusaur staying on, my apologies. And you know, yeah, it's not going to have access to Chlorophyll anymore, but it's still a Pokemon you gotta work your way through.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's why the Max Quake boosts are so important, right? Had that not come through before Porygon 2 went for that Max Hailstorm, Venusaur would not be on the field right now. So now you're in this position where Renzo can still threaten a ton of damage despite that Chlorophyll not being activated for this Venusaur. It's still going to be faster than the Porygon 2, but it all depends on what Kouhei decides to do with the Zacian here.
It's a tough one because you want the Zacian to throw out the Behemoth Blade. You really wanted to. But then you leave it exposed to a Max Quake. Then you get another Max Quake boost on Groudon. That Groudon becomes even harder to take down. At the same time, you know, the Venusaur's just kind of there, being left alone. And I think if you throw any attacks in that direction, you're going to run into problems. With that said, it's a perfect time for Incineroar to come in because now the Zacian's struggling even more. You know, the Intrepid Sword boost immediately taken away.
Absolutely. And well, that's going to be okay. Kouhei just going for a Protect here, just to keep that Zacian fairly safe. As we do see Renzo's Groudon go for another Max Quake.
Dear
that
me.
Protect, wow.
That's a lot of damage
So
through a
much
Protect.
damage.
I know it's obviously significantly reduced, but most importantly, you know, you're just getting another special defense boost. You can't protect properly against that. And this is an interesting choice of move from the Porygon, not trying to go after things with another Max Hailstorm, trying to call that switch in, and that's, you know, I'm pretty sure the Incineroar is going to be feeling relatively okay about taking that one.
Yeah, it's not going to be too affected by that Max move here. But here, the thing is that Renzo is in such a good position when it comes down to how much damage he's going to be pushing with that Groudon. He still has one more turn of Dynamax. Kouhei's Dynamax is over, and he had to spend one of those turns Max guarding in order to not get slept by the Venusaur.
No, the Venusaur really did put pressure down. I mean, the Max Phantasm coming through to try and lower the defense, definitely trying to, help out this Zacian's job. The Zacian lost its attack boost from Intrepid Sword, but to make up for it, yeah, go after it with the Max Phantasm, get that defense down and make sure you can still put down a similar amount of damage. So kind of nicely done. Would have liked more damage, maybe just saying, well, I really need the drop. And this Zacian, wants to hit that Groudon with its defense drop and with the attack boost from Intrepid Sword. So a nice switch out there to the Regieleki. But the Regieleki could just get immediately felled. It's going to avoid the Groudon though. And oh, that is so dangerously close on that Porygon.
That Porygon is going to barely hang on through that Max Quake coming in from Renzo's Groudon. Incineroar though just going to go ahead and finish it off with a very quick U-turn, looks like there. So let's see what Renzo decides to bring out in that Incineroar's place, but that little bit of hope, Porygon's not going to be able to actually fire off an attack.
Yeah, Porygon not really able to do anything there, and the Incineroar leaving actually quite important because it's now back out. Kouhei's forced into dropping the Zacian onto the field right now. And now the Incineroar's just able to come back in as well. Just to make Zacian's life even worse, not only do you have the Groudon to try and get through, there's a Charizard here as well. So there's a whole lot of problems for the Zacian, and I like this from Renzo, learning a little bit from game number 1, saying your end game win condition was the Zacian. Well, now I've got two things that threaten it. Of course, the Regieleki does also threaten that Charizard a little bit, a lot of it rather, but it doesn't threaten the Groudon at all. So it's kind of obvious which has to go for which, but Groudon, feeling pretty good about itself. Apart from that defense drop, has got everything it wants. It just needs to make sure that the Zacian gets knocked out. Any attack from it will probably get it there, and I think this is a really solid position for Renzo to be in. 3 Pokemon to 2, or 4 Pokemon to 2. The Venusaur was clinging on, and then just able to try and fire that one back. Oh, control of the weather though, something I think Renzo is going to be looking for.
Yeah, at this point you can bring out the Venusaur and just kind of allow it to take that Groudon's place so you can preserve that weather for a little bit later. Really nice protect coming in from Renzo as well to make sure that the Charizard is going to survive. Kouhei will be going for this Behemoth Blade, but into this super low Venusaur. So a really, really nice pivot from Renzo just to be able to set up for the perfect endgame.
Well, he's also respecting exactly what could come through from the Zacian. So the big thing here is there was the defense drop. Yes, Groudon was still very, very healthy, but the defense drop could have been giving him some questions he was asking about himself. So he said, you know what, he doesn't need his attack boost anymore, so he can give that one up. He doesn't need the special defense boost because the only special attacker can't really hit into the Groudon. The Regieleki definitely struggles when it comes to dealing with the Groudon. So nice to give those boosts up in exchange for resetting the defense. I mean, the Regieleki does have access to one move that could hit it, but I don't know if the Regieleki wants to spend its time dealing with the Groudon. Hyper Beam would be very, very impactful. May have to be something that's considered when it comes to how do you deal with this Groudon. Doesn't have its special defense boost anymore. It's the second move down. We can see it being hovered. Kouhei is going back and forth. It's a tough decision to make for what this Regieleki goes for.
Yeah, and another switch out from Renzo into the Incineroar. So just a great pivot of Pokemon here in order to keep control of the weather, keep control of the damage on the field, making sure that Zacian doesn't get too out of hand. And we are going to see just the rising voltage here come through onto the Incineroar. Gonna do a decent amount of damage.
Yeah, but Incineroar can take that and is now on the field to drop something like the Fake Out the next turn, or even just go for some attacks. Got the Intimidate down, most importantly, and yeah, look how comfortably that Groudon takes that now. It's absolutely insane. It's going nowhere near, and this Precipice Blades should just be wrapping it up. That's all Groudon needed, was the opportunity to throw out one Precipice Blades. There it is. That's going to be the game.
It's all tied up here now. Renzo taking game number 2, so Kouhei and Renzo with 1 game win apiece. It all comes down to this third and final game to see who is going to be able to move forward through losers round 2. I think it's really interesting how both of these players have had to adjust their strategies. Obviously, when it came to Renzo in that game number 2, he was heavily thinking about that Porygon 2 Dynamax and making sure it didn't catch him this time around as it did in game 1. So now when it comes to how Kouhei is going to adjust to that adjustment, I think maybe bringing in something else to Dynamax. I mean, yesterday we did see him Dynamax the Regieleki. We saw that Max Strike come through.
There, the Max Strike, the Hyper Beam, obviously on there. Thought that was going to have to head towards the Groudon. That was the only way you could deal with it. Was maybe the Behemoth Blade and the Hyper Beam to try and punch through the pretty full health bar that the Groudon had going for it. So leaving that alone, letting Renzo play around that Groudon really, really efficiently was definitely a problem. The one thing we've still not seen out of Kouhei's team, we've seen everything but that single strike Urshifu. And that single strike Urshifu may be something to consider. You know, it does do a whole lot of damage. I think it would just be an interesting mix-up. I've liked the Porygon 2 Dynamax, but in that last game, it was a little bit telegraphed, I think, and Renzo was just able to play around it, knew about the Max Hailstorms. He even led with 2 Pokemon weak to ice-type attacks and was just able to play around it, so clearly not that scared of it anymore. Switched into a Max Phantasm, maybe back to the drawing board a little bit for Kouhei.
Let's go ahead and get right into this game number 3 and see how this series is going to end. Renzo, Kouhei tied at 1 game win apiece. And so the next one that wins is going to be able to move forward. Umbreon and Groudon to kick things off for Renzo. And Kouhei actually switching it up this time. Instead of that Regieleki next to that Porygon 2, it is Incineroar.
Yeah, still sticking with the Porygon 2. Really confident in it. Yes, it is kind of his signature thing in this tournament, but it's just kind of struggled a couple games. We saw it struggle a little bit yesterday as well while he was playing it up in the winners round. So not always the most effective. Definitely going for it with the Dynamax again. I mean, we get to have a sneak peek of that. But you do have to wonder, you know, is there enough in the tank for it to be able to do that? This Groudon has been a bit of a thorn in Kouhei's side, and he has taken a bait to go for it, I think, on this turn.
Nice Incineroar switch in here for Renzo, getting that Intimidate down onto the Porygon 2 and the Incineroar. But that's no matter. That's okay. Kouhei can go ahead and use that Dynamax right away, and it is going to be with that Porygon 2 once again.
This first turn of Dynamax just isn't going to be that impactful, though. We know what he picked. We know he double targeted into the Groudon because he was so scared of it based on the absolute shift it put in the last game. And this Umbreon just trying to make things even harder for Kouhei there. I mean, it's just been so difficult to really get things going when the Umbreon really sets things off. So we'll see exactly how this turn plays out damage-wise. My guess is low.
Yeah. Hey, you know, sometimes you just gotta risk it a little bit. You gotta risk it for the biscuit, Adam. Unfortunately, it's not working out super well because Kouhei would have loved to just take that Groudon out of the equation so that Renzo didn't have access to that weather later on. But I really love that switch in from Renzo, just making sure that that Porygon 2 wasn't going to get too out of hand like it did in that game number 1. I think Renzo is making some excellent adjustments here, and we'll have to see exactly what that Umbreon went for. I'm not entirely sure,
I believe,
based on that animation, what that was. Was that?
I believe it was a taunt, but it also could have been a yawn as well. So depending on how Kouhei responds in this turn, I think that will confirm our suspicions. But overall, you know, really not a great turn for the first turn of your Dynamax. Just really not quite getting that foothold that you want, that big bit of damage. And the weather control, I mean, is easy for Renzo to fix a little bit later as soon as that Groudon turns up. The Incineroar got very little done as well. Forcing Zacian in a little bit early, I think, is an interesting choice. You know, there's no Dynamax on the field, probably wants it there to try and get things done. But there you go, that's the Incineroars are both getting out of this one.
Yeah, like U-turn there for Renzo, just going to allow him a free switch into something else, and it looks like it's going to be that Groudon coming back out for that Incineroar. So changing the weather once again after that Max Hailstorm came through from Kouhei's Porygon 2, but let's go ahead and see here. Umbreon going for a Snarl, so going to be able to drop that special attack of that Porygon 2 just in case it does stay in, and now we should potentially have our suspicions confirmed, as it looks like we will be seeing a Max Strike come through this time, and Groudon does not take that super well.
No, Groudon gets caught with a whole lot of damage on the switch in. Definitely not the safest there. So the speed is lowered. Groudon gets to heal up, so it doesn't look quite as bad at the end of the turn. But that Groudon is now dangerously low. There it is, the yawn confirmed. It was taunt in game number 1, but I like the mix-up to yawn there. And now this Porygon's 2 Dynamax looking real ropey. The third turn, not going to be able to act on it. Such is the power of yawn. And this Groudon's kind of safe right now. You know, it's not going to get caught by the Max Hailstorm, because that's just not an option for Porygon 2 while it's asleep. The Umbreon's able to keep lowering some stats as well, so even if it does wake up in its regular form, it's not going to be able to put that damage back down. And Groudon might just be able to start throwing out, you know, those Precipice Blades, maybe try and deal with that Zacian a little bit early before the Dynamax Canada in something like the Charizard and the Venusaur hits the field. So a lot going on. Groudon not feeling it with that Zacian on the field right now, though, and is more important, something Renzo's done very, very well throughout this set, even in game 1, which he lost. Control that Zacian with the Intimidates.
Yeah, well, Renzo right now recognizes that because Porygon 2 is asleep, it's not going to be nearly as big of a threat. Also, if you switch in the Incineroar instead, knowing that that's going to be a pretty likely target for this Behemoth Blade, Incineroar is going to take that super, super well. So not only are you dropping the attack stat of that Zacian, but you're also making sure you preserve your Groudon to be able to deal with the big threats when they really matter in the endgame.
I think the Umbreon did more damage in that turn with the foul play. Kind of awkward that you drop the foul play after the Intimidate drop, so of course the attack's a little bit lowered. But, you know, good damage down on that Zacian, making it very manageable for nigh on anything on the field. And this Umbreon just isn't threatened right now. I think this is the best showing Umbreon's had. You know, the Yawn was very, very impactful. The Snarl's definitely helping out as well. And now it's going to start whittling down this Zacian. It'd probably be about a 4-hit knockout, but there's nothing threatening it unless the Zacian decides to go for a Sacred Sword over onto it. So the Zacian just really has to get a lot done in the next couple turns, and if it starts throwing its targeting wrong or throwing attacks into slots that are just not super effective, things could turn a little bit quickly. There's one of those attacks into a not super effective slot. Sacred Sword into Venusaur.
And now Umbreon can fire back with another foul play. And it's still gonna chip away at that Zacian a little bit here. Porygon 2 still taking a nap, but really, really hoping it's going to wake up to be able to get some big damage into that Venusaur. Or hopefully maybe even the Groudon if it switches back into that Venusaur slot.
Really wants to hit that. I mean, the Incineroar would have been a decent target for it, obviously, but a nice switch in to the Venusaur. And the Venusaur does have the sun going for it, meaning the Chlorophyll is active. So not a bad time to be a Venusaur. The Umbreon just slowly chipping away at that Zacian, just saying, you know what, if you're not going to Sacred Sword me, that's fine. I'm just going to keep foul playing you. Have fun. And I'm just going to keep working through it. It's not going to be doing that anymore, though. I do like this Incineroar switch in to keep that Zacian even more manageable. Its attack now down a stage. The Intrepid Sword was taken away with the first Intimidate, and now this Intimidate's taken away the next one. So the Zacian not putting in the shift it wants, and yet Renzo's seen the opportunity, got the sun. Why not, right? Why not get your Venusaur going here?
Absolutely. I mean, you could just end up taking that Porygon 2 out before it can even attack you. Or that Zacian, just remove it from the field so it can't go for a Behemoth Blade into your Gigantamax. There's so many different ways that Renzo can really play this. But at first, we're going to see the Zacian just protect here. So Kouhei playing it very, very safe. Maybe just expecting that something big is going to come through here. Like this big Max Quake from this Venusaur, but because of that protect, Zacian is going to be able to take that very well.
Yeah, it's going to take that much better than the one we saw actually from the Groudon in the previous game. Probably feeling a little bit better about that. The special defense boost helping out for, of course, when that Porygon 2 wakes up. Not going to be this turn, though. Porygon 2 staying asleep. And the Venusaur probably feeling pretty good about this turn. I mean, the Zacian is kind of forced to switch out, right? You know, it's stood opposite the Incineroar. It's going to get faked out, and it just showed its protect. So it either has to fish for that double protect, or it has to try and play around that. We did get to look at Kouhei's team. I got to finally see it very, very quickly. The single strike Urshifu is on the team, so maybe that's going to be the end game difference maker for him there. It's not going to come to play right now, though, as Incineroar just comes back onto the field.
I think that's really smart because you want to make sure that you can reset the attack drops onto the Zacian for later. And also, yeah, you're playing around with this fake out beautifully. Venusaur now going to be able to go for that G-Max Fine Lash right into the sleeping Porygon 2. And that Porygon 2 is bound to wake up at any point now.
Yep, there it is. It's awake, finally.
Hyper Beam going right into Renzo's Incineroar. And it's not even...
It's not going to get there. I mean, there's the special defense boost coming through from the Max Quake in the previous turn. There's, of course, the special attack drop that Porygon 2 is still holding on to from earlier on in the game, and that Umbreon. So really tough time to be Porygon 2 in this game. And Renzo, you know, I think is about to show how you get more value out of your Dynamax turns. Kouhei obviously, got caught with the sleep, so he was missing one that way. His targeting was just a little bit off, I think, across the board, and certainly causing problems. Renzo showing exactly what a good Dynamax, or in this case Gigantamax, can actually do, though, putting down good amounts of damage and getting important boosts over the couple of turns.
Yeah, I think what was a really difficult situation for Kouhei to be in is the fact that, you have no idea whether or not you should leave your Porygon 2 in just to go to sleep from the yawn or try to pivot it out, and what kind of position are you going to be putting yourself in that predicament. But Renzo going to go ahead and U-turn into Kouhei's Incineroar, bringing out that Umbreon once again. And the Flare Blitz now from the Incineroar on Kouhei's side, going right into the Umbreon, and the recoil enough to just finish off that Incineroar.
No, it was done at the end of the turn anyway. The residual damage from G-Max Vine Lash was going to get it, but the Umbreon takes that very, very nicely. It was maybe trying to see if it could sneak in a knockout on the opposing Incineroar and just be able to pick it up that way. That's the second turn of G-Max Vine Lash, so this, you have to be careful what you're bringing in here. If you do show this single strike Urshifu, then it's going to get its Focus Sash broken, and even if it gets brought down to its Focus Sash, is going to struggle. It does make for quite a potent endgame, though. Of course, you can't be protecting in front of it. The ability completely ignores that, and maybe that gives something to think about over on Renzo's side. That said, he still has 4 Pokemon, and Kouhei is down to just 3, one of which being that Porygon, probably going to get easily picked off, if not in the turn, at the end of the turn as well. So a lot riding on this single strike Urshifu, throwing out those attacks and making sure that every target you hit is a premium target.
Yeah, I think what makes this really tough is that Urshifu in this predicament doesn't necessarily want to go for the close combat unless it absolutely has to, because you are taking on the risk of those defense and special defense drops when you actually select that move. So we'll have to see how Kouhei decides to play around this, and also how Renzo is going to pivot around this big threat of the Urshifu. We do see the Groudon coming back in, and Venusaur just going for a huge, absolutely huge attack with that Frenzy Plant. And that is going to bring that Urshifu right down to its Focus Sash. Going for combat, though.
We're not going to see much out of this Urshifu because it's going to get taken out at the end of the turn. Very nicely done from Renzo to set up with that Groudon coming back in as soon as the sun expired, getting it right back into Chlorophyll activation and just being able to charge on through. This is looking real bleak for Kouhei now, as there just wasn't enough out of that Urshifu. I was expecting to maybe see it go for a Wicked Blow, make sure it lands that critical hit. The Umbreon had options to switch out. I don't think the close combat was the right play there. And now you're into just, you're in a situation where you're 1 Zacian versus 4 Pokemon from Renzo. He's been maneuvering his board so well in games 2 and 3 really, really well. A bit of a Groudon masterclass, really.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is exactly how you want to play the Groudon, especially into a Zacian, right? Make sure the Groudon is right in when you need it to be, but also Venusaur can still just kind of, sit on the field and do, at least threaten a little bit here. But Kouhei recognizing that after that Frenzy Plant that Venusaur is going to have to recharge, so correctly targets down the Groudon, removing at least 1 threat from the field, but Renzo still has a couple more Pokemon that he can put out there to deal with this Zacian.
Yeah, going with the Incineroar, getting rid of the Intrepid Sword boost. The problem, once again, with Zacian as an end-game sweeper, particularly when you're this far back in the Pokemon count, you've only got single target attacks. The Venusaur's going to be able to attack this turn, the Incineroar's going to be able to fake you out, or just attack you as well, and you're on a timer because you're getting caught by the G-Max Vine Lash between turns as well. Venusaur, though, using the speed from Chlorophyll, using the sun that was so nicely set up for it by that Groudon, the focal point of this team, supporting its partners and just pushing Renzo 1 step further along in the losers bracket, sealing up by showing off some more of the tricks from Venus.